All right, everyone. Well, I know we're still waiting on a few folks. I know the weather is terrible, but I haven't gotten any text from anybody saying they were going to be late. So hopefully they'll show up soon. Hopefully they'll be safe and all of that. But I also want to be mindful of everybody's time, but appreciate that. So, lots of important work happening, which is really, really great. And I appreciate, like I said, we were a little ahead of schedule. We're able to skip a meeting or, cancel a meeting that we had scheduled, which was really, really great. So, but then I think now we're kind of really getting into the important pieces and we'll start the mapping process. So today we'll definitely cover that. I think, there's lots of, it's hard, I think, with this process because there's also things moving forward. So I think it's just valuable for SAC members to continue to be active in meetings. There was the West County swim meeting, which Nicole went to and kind of gave some briefings on and some other things. And I think, once again, it just kind of shows like the importance that there are already things that are still happening even outside of our process. And, I'm hopeful for a West County swim. I mean, my wife and I had to take our son and daughter to a swim pool in Prince George's County 50 minutes away because there's really not a place for us to go here in Anne Arundel County. So it's really disappointing that, we have to drive and do that. And it was a really nice facility with the splash pad and 3 slides and it cost us a whopping $6 a person. So, there's no reason why we can't have something similar here in Anne Arundel County. So that's kind of the importance of this. It's like, what can we bring to West County? What can we make sure so we have like really great things for everybody to enjoy? And then
the watershed meeting, and Marley gave a wonderful presentation for the commercial development that we hope to have over there with wonderful shops and eateries that we'd be able to partake in, hopefully in 2024 or 5 or somewhere over there. Watershed. There's a commercial development that's coming that we hope will not have a dollar store, nail salon, or dry cleaners. It looks really nice, and we just hope that we can have a establishment with a liquor license where we can have a nice adult beverage. Was the one thing we had requested, a sit-down place, which is what we've all been wanting for quite a long time. Even us up here would drive down there to go have a nice sit-down establishment with an adult beverage. So that was our one request. I think that they heard loud and clear. So, and we need another affordable daycare for folks like you guys with kiddos, because that's desperately needed. We've been needing that for quite a long time. My kids are older now, but I wish I would have had one because all we have over there is kinder care and they're maxed out. There's like a waiting list that I couldn't even get on, even when I was pregnant. And my kids, I was on the list and I still never got a slot. And they're 12 and 13 now. So exactly. So, but Marley gave a great presentation. There's some lady that walked in at the end was like, we don't want this. And she missed like the whole presentation, which was kind of interesting, but Marley did a great job and what have you. So we are anxiously awaiting to see what's going to come over there.
Yeah, and then the other thing I just wanted to point out, I only read one article, so if anybody knows more about it, or maybe if folks on the SAC are interested, we can reach back out to the casino. But there was a really big article in Investors Business Daily about how Maryland Live is expanding, and I was really interested to see that there's 18 acres that they suddenly said that they're going to move a stormwater pond underground, and then it said expand, and it didn't say what that is, but that was not mentioned by Rob Norton when he met with us. So I don't know what that means, but I mean, expansion, I don't know, it's already busy over there. So I don't know if folks, either A, if anybody kind of knows what that is, or if we would like to get more information from the, I personally am really interested in what that means. And does that mean there's going to be a skyway as people go from one? Because I don't think it's connected to the, I don't know. So
we already put the hotel, we already have the casino. It's like, what more are they going to expand over there?
So I don't know, does anybody know more about it? Or, okay, yeah, so kind of a bummer that they didn't at least like kind of give us an idea that was coming. So if folks are interested, we can reach out and learn more. Yeah, okay. So I see everybody is nodding yes. So okay, well then we'll reach out then, and I think that the article, they also have a new general manager. It sounds like business is booming because they're expanding not only here, but in 4 other states, so.
They said they pay $1 million a day in taxes to.
That was, yeah, I mean, it's, people like to gamble in Maryland, it's something like $600 million a month and, you know, revenue coming through, so. You know, people like to get, and then, you know, sports gambling too, on people's phones, I think we're up to like $400 million in the first month, so.
Did you say you got a new manager?
They got a new GM is what it said.
It just said they had a new manager. So
Yeah, Gene is the manager of,
probably got a point.
he's not the manager of the casino, he's the manager of the mall.
The whole ball.
The mall, yeah.
Which we can see the sits on, but.
Right.
Yeah, so yes, there's new, I mean, but I think it's because they're expanding, the Maryland Live is going to 4 more, I think casinos in 4 more states, so. But it was just like the footnote was, oh, and by the way, there's these 18 acres that they can now develop. And I was like,
Went nicely towards the
Yeah, I was
very
like,
end.
what does that mean?
Very last
So,
little spiel. I was like, that was conveniently slipped in at the end.
okay, so we'll do that. Excellent. So, you know, once again, like I just appreciate, you know, it's really nice to see people attending the meetings and, because like I said, kind of parallel to what we're doing here, there are, so. Yeah,
One other thing
Yeah.
about, you know, new construction in our
Yeah.
area, I was surprised to see, I had noticed it before we passed it way here. That they're building a highway noise barrier, right, on this road.
Oh, I saw
Same
that.
road I live on.
I didn't know they were doing.
Yeah, you know, it's the same thing you might find on an interstate highway, and to protect the noise from Karen Court.
Mhm.
the side road there. You know, things are changing.
and then Chad, we haven't met formally. Hi, I'm Joe Franco, Chair of the SAC. It's really nice to have you here. Not to put you on the spot, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and, I don't know, maybe your, you know, your favorite, you know, ice cream or something like that? So,
Superman ice cream.
okay, oh, there we go.
So, that's Michigan. So, my name is Chad Jones. I am appointed ex officio on the board, represent the Fort Meade. I'm the public affairs officer there, been there about 12 years, so in working with the garrison and the installation, obviously tied into and always curious about the growth that is happening in the region and
Us too.
the role we can play, and then hopefully, you know, either as advocates for, or, you know, keep us to where we need to go, but also just how it impacts our mission and quality of life for the service members, the family that work here as we continue to expand.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you know, I think, you know, we all went on a tour of base in April of last year. We had 2 driving tours, so that was really, really helpful. I know I learned a ton, so that was really good. But I think, you know, as always on this group, you kind of probably just heard, we're all very hungry on any sort of information. So, you know, anytime you can share anything about expansion or ideas or needs, I think we would really welcome that. You know, I mean, I think our concern that we have said pretty much in every meeting with the Fort is, you know, we are very grateful for the jobs and for the protection it provides, but for those of us that live around the Fort, we also have to feel the pain of that growth you know, I really hope that we can get our state partners, county partners, and federal partners to, you know, it sounds like we have a big investment in roads and traffic and that, but I think that's what we want. You know, 32 is very, you know, there's lots of traffic issues and other things. So, you know, we really thank you for being here. And we know it's a big part of your time.
And the Fort is growing,
Yeah,
leaps and bounds every day. We've got about 65,000 people who work there now. So that's the 2nd largest Army fort in the United States, but it's the largest employer in Maryland. But so external advocacy, the 32 is primary. We did about all we can do with 175, I think. So moving on to 32, and then the Route 100, 170 corridor, because a lot of us come from that Pasadena, Glen Burnie area, and Reese Road coming down and starting to become a mess. So that seems to be at least externally what we're advocating for most in regards to infrastructure. Beyond buses, everybody thinks that we need more actual rideshare options.
Yeah.
Mass transportation options around here, because there are none. So
Well, great. Well, in looking at our agenda, we actually have a piece where we're going to go over some of our outstanding strategies. So maybe if you're open to it, Chad, folks have questions that we previously had from other strategies that kind of touched on the four. We could not open them up again, but we can at least have folks asking questions if that was okay. Of course. Okay, excellent. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and confirm the agenda today. Sorry, is there any additions, changes? It's agenda twice. Okay, so motion to pass the agenda. Keisha and Kevin. Any objections? No. Okay, great. So we have an agenda for today. And thank you once again, staff, for the January 19th meeting notes. Looked really good to me. But are there any changes, edits, additions that we should discuss on the meeting notes? No. Have a motion to approve them. Keisha? Okay, and Kevin will second again. Yeah, perfect. All right, and with no objections, we'll have those passed. So, so with that, like I said, we have a few outstanding strategies that we'll kind of walk through here. And like I said, if we need to, it's nice to have chat here. Well, I would love to take advantage of that. So folks have specific questions as well about any strategies or ideas or that. In regards to Fort Meade, that's very applicable and helpful. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Okay, great. So again, just always want to recap where we've been, where we're going in this process. So over the past, well, it's probably been about a year now, the SAC had heard presentations from various departments within the county, talking about the issues, sort of long-term, short-term types of issues that some of these departments are facing in regards to land use. We also brought in a few additional speakers that could speak more to affordable housing, since that seems to be a hot topic here in Region 2. So during those discussions, the Office of Planning and Zoning heard a lot of ideas of strategies that we need to implement in this region plan over the next 10 or 20 years. So we then transitioned in January to start reviewing those draft strategies. And we are now at that last meeting where we're just wrapping up a few of those last remaining strategies, and then we'll transition into mapping, like Joe mentioned. While the SAC is transitioning into the mapping, we're going to push out those draft strategies that the SAC had reviewed to the public and get the public's feedback on those. And we anticipate that public review will occur in March for about 33 days or so. And then when that closes, we'll hopefully be finishing up the mapping. And then as an SAC, we can talk about what some of the comments were that the public had on those draft strategies. While we're meeting to talk about that, the mapping will be out for public review. So a couple concurrent processes happening there. And then we do sort of lay out a game plan here of when a preliminary draft will go out, and then when it'll go out to the Planning Advisory Board and ultimately to the County Council for adoption. Okay, so let's just jump into these draft strategies. There were 3 for cultural resources, and then Joe, we wanted to talk about one for healthy economy, dealing with recreational cannabis. So let me go ahead and blow this screen up a little bit. And okay, so this was one of those cultural resource strategies. I noted here in those track changes, what's been struck and what's been added. That was just based on our last conversation, just keeping that to show you here. So based on those changes, OPZ, we said that we would go back and see if this was kind of redundant, because we kind of took a few items out here and whether it was already really addressed in Plan 2040. And that was our conclusion, was that what you have listed here is already addressed adequately, and that we can then, if you'd like, go ahead and delete this strategy. And again, I listed a few of those strategies from Plan 2040 that reference the same type, the intent of the draft region plan strategy.
Is there one?
There- Yeah.
Yeah, the key there is update existing cultural resource first sentence,
Right.
strengthen protective measures.
Okay. Moving on then to strategy 3, which was the second one that we need to discuss. There was that discussion about should we use the term architectural consistency to be consistent with the way we phrased an earlier strategy rather than overlay design guidelines. And to get some more information about how cultural resources defines historic fabric and cultural integrity. So again, shopping this back out to them, they responded and suggested that this one be deleted again, just because there really aren't any survey districts here within Region 2. The next strategy also includes historic fabric and cultural integrity, so that's where that definition is. So don't think I'm skipping over that for now. Okay. There was also the question of what the county inventory of historic resources means, so. Writing that. Okay, it's delete.
Yep.
Okay. Strategy number 5. So the original one is highlighted there in blue. Again, after consulting with them, sharing some of the concerns or questions that you all had, they tweaked the strategy to this recommendation here in bold below the original, and then provided some additional information about 20th century. The question that you all had was, can this really be narrowed down to a tighter time frame? And then also a question about the definition of historic fabric and cultural integrity. So their new recommendation does still include the reference to 20th century and still includes historic fabric, but they have built out the recommendation a little bit more. So I'll give you a minute to read that. I'm going to scroll up just a little bit so you can catch the bottom there. Yeah, I know. I apologize. That's wordy.
I don't know if you just press control and scroll, which might blow it up.
Let's go. Want to make sure that it fits all
Oh.
width-wise here. 110 gets us a little better there.
I thought you would have learned from your theater classes.
Yeah.
What is different between the two? Wait,
More words.
Not a whole lot, narrowing, not a whole lot,
okay.
wordsmith.
How does a property get on the inventory to begin with? I never did quite understand. I know, understand historic,
Mhm.
you know, you go through that whole process, but how does it get on the inventory?
Starting with the application process.
No, I don't know. I mean, just.
Yeah, so I believe they said that anyone can submit an application to nominate a structure to be on the inventory, and then it's an analysis by cultural resources to evaluate.
Anybody can nominate even if they don't own the property?
That's what I understand.
That's what I thought it was for, so if I want to nominate Marilee's property as historic, that's 60 years old, I could just fill out an application and do it.
Understand something you don't?
I don't.
No.
That's
It is.
It seems
That's
overreaching.
kind of scary.
Although in some cases you can see it, I mean, it's a community, treasured community focus point.
But what if it's not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's not.
And then it could be used as well,
It can't be, right.
Right, that's- yeah, that's-
I like the part where it says, just because it's old, doesn't mean it's historic,
yeah.
Right,
right? I mean, some
that was the
Asset
concern you
have
had, I think, Marilee. was-
age and integrity, others don't.
Yeah.
And all properties are the same.
So how do folks feel about the cultural resource recommendation, the revised version?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then the last one we need to discuss tonight is one for the economy. Joe, thanks for raising this issue. I think it's really important here. I think this really captures what Christina wordsmithed at last meeting a little bit. I just kind of rounded it out here a little bit. So we could certainly tweak this as you'd like, so.
How are we gonna guarantee that other portions of the county will put cannabis facilities there? Like Annapolis is gonna say no.
We can't, but this is
Yeah.
our suggestion to the council.
Yeah.
We can't guarantee that it's gonna happen, but this is our suggestion to them, that they evaluate the code to make sure that it is fairly distributed so that, we don't get hammered with it and Savannah Park gets none. Or Crofton gets none and we get all of them, you know what I mean? So this is our suggestion. What they do with it, they do with it, but this is our suggestion to them. We all know what they're gonna do, but this is our suggestion. So we can say, our name is gonna go on this document, so we can say, look, we said this, what they chose to do is different, but this was our suggestion. And then when it comes up for council, we all go out there with our little ticketing signs, and what have you.
And that's why we have a robust public process with SAC and then putting these strategies out to the public at least 2 times so that we can say that this has been reviewed by the public and supported by the public.
And have any of the other SACs talked about this?
Mhm.
So should it say permit the equitable or should it say not enforce, but
I think enforce would be too strong.
but we're trying to say that they should be throughout the county instead of.
Yeah, instead of permit, I think you should say provide for, to provide for distribution. It's a little stronger.
It's kind of like the whole liquor store thing in some places. They're just in lower income areas, they're all, you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
they're all there. What do we mean by equitable, just for me? I mean, that word's thrown around these days so much.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I know what it means.
well, I think part of it is when we brought up the code last time, there were specific areas within the county. It has to be north of Route 50 or X
That's
number.
already written in.
Right.
Mhm.
So there are certain actual geographical references in the code.
That are already written in as of 6 minutes.
Is uses another word for store or dispensaries?
There was some.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you're right, uses.
But that's a zoning.
That's a.
I mean, is that an
Yeah,
official
so this-
term?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This would be,
Dispensary? And is the intent to not? We don't want it. We don't want as many in this area, is that the?
Yeah, we're really worried that they're gonna stack,
Land them all.
they're gonna write the zoning so that way it only would fit in West County and then we would have like 8 of them. Because Severna Park and Annapolis and
Don't want
Edgewater
any.
don't want any.
Well, cause I mean, I know the four, like every dispensary is gonna be put on our off limits list. like,
Correct.
Right away. So I don't know if like public facilities could include federal facility, because then that would. Expand the standoff distance from, because there are several federal facilities are around this area that.
So is that other federal and public facilities?
I would think.
Can we say that?
public.
Yeah, either way.
Does it-
I think that captures.
Well, public and federal, because Fort Meade is a federal facility. Or a bunch of federal, but it's not necessarily public.
Government is a public entity,
Yep.
so it's a government facility. It's a public facility.
So that would come up before the council, and then the council member who this is in would be Julie Hummer, and she would advocate on that. To say it's gonna be on the no-fly list for them, so. She would advocate on, when this comes before her, to say, it's already gonna be on the ban list, so. It's not gonna be allowed anywhere in the vicinity of Fort Meade, so
By band list, you mean nobody.
you can't go there.
So we have a list of
They-
places where.
Right, they
service
can't go to
members are
certain
not allowed
nightclubs,
to-
they can't go to certain this, they can't go to certain things, they can't live in certain neighborhoods, certain, like Steel Meadows, Pioneer City, Mead Village, like they can't live
They
there.
used to be, yeah, we
Right.
moved the neighborhoods.
Right.
We thought that was.
When Mike first got here, there was places we couldn't live, there
Yeah.
are bars they can't go to, there's establishments they can't be in, if you're found there, it's,
Okay.
yeah.
But the point of this one though is that to go back to the code and change it so that these things don't happen, right? So that-
Correct.
Yeah,
So that would come under public facilities, because that would include state, local, federal, et cetera, because like you said, federal includes. Government entities would be included under public facilities, so that would be the responsibility of Julie Hummer, who's the councilwoman for me. It's in her area.
And again, we would just be able to point to this and say. This is what we want.
but is it all just about setbacks or is it about areas too? Like,
I think by setback, they're not talking lot setbacks.
No, we're not talking lot setback, we're saying like, you know, how you can't have. From a. Feet of a school zone,
Yeah.
Right.
public, whatever. So that.
Right, but should it also include, these should only be on, collector and above roads or things like that, that they put in the code so that they know.
They put that, I don't know if you can pull that up, Mark, but they had it within, you couldn't have it, they can't be within this many of. It had to be so many. Mile south
Yeah.
of Route 50, you couldn't have it within this,
100 feet of parks. Yeah.
correct, like that was already in, that's already in there right now.
Sorry, I just changed distance to setback because setback has a specific zoning
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
definition, so.
I love those spaces.
Yeah, I
Because
think that's
public
one.
facilities would be
Yeah, the other
libraries,
Right.
That would include whatever.
Yeah, between distances and setbacks. Distance. It's something.
I think he's saying once he deletes it, it's gonna.
Yeah.
It's gonna.
Yeah, they're-
Yeah.
So you're gonna have two spaces per den.
This is current. Are there any in the area? Dispensaries?
There's some in PG.
I would say it's like
They're in
right
house
across from March, right?
Yeah, it's right over the line, from the Anne Arundel to PG side, there's several. In Laurel. Right by that special needs school. And the closing quotes.
I don't know.
Yes. And that's the type of.
Okay.
Do we need the word zoning between cannabis and uses? Because are people gonna see cannabis uses and people actually consuming marijuana? Like the general public?
That's what, just asking what our uses.
Yes, maybe we just need to have cannabis zoning uses.
Yeah, what is it under, you know?
Well, it's, I figured it's either a conditional use or a special exception, but I haven't found it in place.
Huh.
Should make it a special exception.
Yeah, what is?
Just 10 is conditional.
Under 1811.
Because I agree with you, uses, someone could take that as,
It's under
Special
special
exception.
exception,
Yeah, but it's.
1811.
And what is it called?
Licensed premises of licensed dispensaries of medical cannabis.
That's why I find it under licensed health.
Yeah.
And that says medical, what's the difference then, medical and
Recreational
recreational?
starts in July.
Yeah, and so we have it.
So we have to add that.
Recreational.
Yeah,
but, well, I don't know the law here, but. Like in Colorado, they could, like in Colorado, everybody had medical and they did recreational. But you can now have a recreational that's not medical. I don't know here if they have to be tethered together or if you can just have a recreational and not medical.
We don't know how, I don't think we know how that's gonna go.
No, because it doesn't start till July 1. I don't think anybody's figured it out yet.
So the interesting thing here is that north of US 50 and north of the northeast shore of the South River, it cannot be within 500 feet in a straight line from the lot line of a lot located in a residential district. But then located north of 50 but then it's 750 feet in a straight line to a private school or real property owned by the Board of Ed. So for schools, it's a 750-foot setback. And then from residential lots or dwelling units, it's 500 feet. Then for an industrial zoning district, vehicular access shall be directly from an arterial road, from a local or higher classification road that directly accesses an arterial road. I mean, so what they do with these regs is then you have to look around the county and you have to see where the property is zoned for the use. Then you have to figure out, well, does it meet the road requirements? Does it meet those setback requirements from residential areas, from school areas? And then what that ends up doing is it eliminates a lot of area where you could actually have one of these. So I think what your point is we want them equitably distributed around the county. We don't want the regs written in such a way that they're all pushed into West County.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
How do you limit that?
You gotta go advocate when it's at council. I mean, definitely, we're gonna have recreational cannabis We're gonna have some kind of legislative change.
Do you see council potentially changing the licensed medical section of the code while they update the recreational?
To co-locate them, then they may end up having to change this
Right.
part of the code.
Yeah,
I think it's all a possibility. We
And then
don't,
I end up with 3 sleazy hotels on 198 back to back to back.
Yeah.
Which we all know is gonna happen. Or you end up with all the strip clubs and liquor stores and dry cleaners on 175 in front of the port.
I don't like dry cleaners.
Because we have 8 in a 3-block radius in front of 175.
Because in the past, we used to use a lot of practices, we don't really use.
We don't need them
really
anymore.
many-
Now you have to use and you don't need them.
Well,
You
yeah.
just watch it go. But I'm saying like, but they never left. You know what I mean? You still have 8 in a 3-block. I mean, drive down the street, you have 8 in a 3-block radius followed by a liquor store and a Chinese restaurant. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need any more. But that's what keeps coming.
If there wasn't a market for it, though, we would be there. I mean, why,
Does seem odd.
what's that?
It does seem odd that they're.
It does.
That's what just keeps coming. Dollar stores and nail salons. I mean, I don't need any more of what I need. So, but that's what's gonna come, you know, because one attracts the other, attracts the other. We've seen it in PG. I did Medicaid case management in 4 counties, like, trust me, I've been in neighborhoods. I know what's gonna come.
I mean, I think this, I guess my final question, I find everything else, just do we need some word between cannabis and uses? Either permitting, zoning, just so that way it's clarified that uses isn't actual consumption.
I don't disagree with
So is that the
Is
wrong
it
word?
facilities, evaluate the county? Facilities, medical,
Licensing?
recreational cannabis facility.
Licensing uses?
Facility locations, your uses.
Okay, yeah.
But I thought uses had, that's the first thing I had, but I thought uses was the official term.
Yeah, you all,
that would be referenced in.
yeah, so I'm trying to so it's. How do we define, how do we use a
Is it
word that
facility, is it licensing, because that's what it's under in there.
licensing uses? Maybe licensing?
Zoning uses.
So-
But see, the way the zoning code works, is we have a use chart.
Yeah.
We have a use chart, and
Yeah.
that's how it's defined in the use chart. I think, I have done this a long time, I think it's very clear, but I can understand how.
I just think from the general public, we're gonna put this out to public thing, and they're gonna look at it. I mean, Thomas is, you know, like, I think we're all kind of like, I'm thinking uses is. Well, you know,
And you just add zoning, the county, between county and code. Evaluate the county's zoning code. To provide for it.
Well, I don't think you want to say.
I was just thinking that it could be a.
It's a special exception, so, you know, a permitted use is by right. You meet the bulk standards and you've got the use, it can happen on the property. Then the next level is conditional use. It's generally permitted, but you have to meet certain conditions. Then there's special exception. You have to go before the administrative hearing officer. That's a public hearing.
But the question at hand is, how do we tell the public when we're talking about zoning?
So can we not bracket after uses and just describe what it is? Like,
Or can we just put zoning in
dispensary?
brackets between cannabis and use?
How about zoning between county and code?
I don't know if those things are tied in.
Christine, it is called the permitted use chart though, right? Or is it just the use chart?
No, I think it is spelled out,
Permitted.
Or just say special exception use.
which isn't all, it's like deceiving because it says permitted, but then you look under and it's conditional special exception.
But it's, yeah, it's not just the permitted, it's not just. To me, the text in the zoning code, it's also the zoning that goes with it. I don't know that you really want to get that specific.
Would you just want to say in parentheses as defined in the zoning code? And then that would
Yeah.
cover it.
Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, there we go, yeah.
And then that last sentence, instead of being specific about distances, do you really want to just say the code should establish requirements that limit facilities
Yeah,
near blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Cause that's really what you want them to do, right? You want them to have,
Yeah,
just distances.
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, okay.
quick before we change our minds. Go to the next one.
That's it. Okay, so that's the remaining strategies. Joe, I know you said at the beginning of the meeting, if you wanted to open the floor to any discussion about Fort Meade.
Yeah, no pressure to, but since Chad is here, which is great, was there any? We talked a lot, Chad, about transportation, as you can imagine, affordable housing, all of that. It's ancillary too, so I don't know if anybody has any questions for the board or.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're done with 175. I assume that means after the bridge of the parkway is done?
Yeah, we're done in regards to advocacy for 175, now the project's been done.
Okay, got it.
In that, I mean,
Right.
we spent a lot of years trying to push it to get 175.
And it's pretty much expanded from.
Right.
Yeah, too bad they couldn't have gotten the bridge done during COVID. Yeah.
Not that we would not support any other expansion project, it's just where we want to advocate, it seems like from what we're getting 32.
So essentially from National Business Parkway all the way to the Fort.
Well, ideally, if it worked out, it'd be all the way to 70, all the way. That we got a lot of people that come in from Carroll County. And Howard County.
Any
Okay.
plans for 198? Because a lot of people come off that parkway and go to 32 that way, 198 could really use some expansion, because there's a bottleneck every day, starting at 2:30, 3 o'clock. These guys, Jim put in a nice little extra lane only in one direction, but when that lane ends, there's a nice little bottleneck every day at the same time of day where everybody that lives here avoids it like the plague. But what happens is our law enforcement folks are stuck when they go to Laurel because they're on an island by themselves over there, and there's really no other way for police, fire, and EMS to get over to Laurel where they need to be because of that bottleneck on 198.
With the bridge, the
Correct.
one lane bridge, yeah.
Correct.
well, that's-
And that's yours because it's the Army Corps of Engineers, because when it washed out, you guys had to fix it.
Yeah.
So,
So that's a good point. I mean, we could certainly look to expand. 'Cause usually how it goes with command, we sit down with like, hey, where we speak with our larger partners on the Fort, what area do we need to advocate for, so.
I mean, my husband's been law enforcement for 23 years, and so that's our biggest concern is those police cars are stuck, and then, they can't get on the parkway because that's a shit show every day. On Thursday, starting at 2 o'clock, so those cars are on an island by themselves, and they literally have to go the back way up into the Howard County side to come back and get to where they need to be, and it's just not safe for them, and there's 2 cars at midnight, there's 3. And so it's just really not safe for them to get to where they need to be. And if somebody's in trouble and they need to get to another part of the county, they just can't get there.
Right.
So it presents a safety issue. And if there's something going on here, like the other morning at 10 a.m., there was a shooting last week here, but luckily it happened at 10 a.m. and everybody was able to get to where they need to be because rush hour had just ended.
Right.
But if there's something going on, we have 3 schools over here. So there's something at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and there's a school shooting, nobody can get to them. That presents a huge problem.
Yes. The issue we've always run into 198 has been more environmental and how to expand, but like that one lane
Right.
bridge, expanding that is almost impossible.
Because of the river.
Yeah. But there was always talk of doing like some kind of flyover just to eliminate 198 and getting to the Fort as a whole.
Right, because once you put that flag, because 32, we didn't used to have that traffic circle there. It didn't used to be there when I first got here in '99, so. But then you had fatalities every other week and we finally put the traffic circle and the flyover and that's eliminated that almost virtually, so. But we have to come up with another way to do something there.
So I could certainly say with like a body like this, at least what I would do with it in forwarding it up to command on areas that we would advocate for is that, you know, not voting on it, but if Region 2, if this body come like, hey, can you look at 198 as an area to advocate for an expansion with it, that's
You know,
that is added to the conversation because then it all becomes just part of a priority. So the community is asking us to make a certain area a priority that weighs heavily on what we will do.
and if it's the refuge, we can work with the Fish and Wildlife ladies, because they came to the presentation that Arundel gave, you know, if that's an issue, we can work with them and, you know, Nestor and the folks in traffic management and see what we can do to protect wildlife and all that kind of stuff, but we have to do something. Because it's to the point where it's, you know, we can't do it, it's a bottleneck every morning, every evening, going one way, the other way. It's becoming a safety issue for police, fire, and EMS to get where they need to be at this point.
So are you saying that we should make it one of our strategies that's in the plan? And that would help advocate or no?
I mean, if it was in there, but I don't know if it has to be that formal. So like, literally after this, when I talked to command probably on Tuesday, I'll be like, hey, I was at the Region 2 meeting in 198. We need to look at finding out some ways to advocate for it. And we'll probably dig into some of the past efforts we tried to do. Like I said, a lot of it did revolve around just environmental issues. And there's a lot of stuff that makes it more difficult to expand 198 than other places. But if it is, it's just like 175, if it becomes a priority that the community wants us to focus on, and that certainly is impacted. We use that road a lot. The growth's going to happen more. We got more people coming. So
Doesn't hurt to include something.
no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So we'll work on something. I mean, if you want, we can bring it back to you, but I think,
We have transportation in
We
there,
have
198 is not mentioned, but it's specifically that Laurel is mentioned. And transportation is mentioned, in the transportation section, Laurel is mentioned, so.
but specifically access to Fort Meade, right?
Fort Meade is mentioned in there too, but I don't know how, but
We can look at it.
Yeah.
we can.
If you could come up with something that you're proposing, just so we can take.
The other question I had, which has come up frequently, is moving the MacArthur is only access. I wanted to grease the wheel first.
Okay.
I wanted to give them a second before I attacked. MacArthur is only accessible for DoD kids. And so we have to transfer a lot of kids to Meade. And that's why the population numbers at MacArthur versus Meade are so dramatically different in terms of enrollment.
So that first part of your statement is not accurate in that any kid can get there. The issue becomes,
The gate.
no, the issue becomes their parents or their guardians do not have the ability or the want to get access to the board.
Correct.
So we work a lot with the schools where kids would be left and their parents were not able to either pass a background check or unwilling to take it, or they weren't citizens. So they could not get access. So the kid could get to school fine, the parent could not come and pick them up. And that is where then the answer from Anne Arundel County Public Schools was that in those cases, and really what we've got, it was only about 50 cases over the last couple of years, where then they would move the kid from MacArthur to Meade Middle School to resolve those issues for kids whose guardians could not get on the board. Kids can, I mean, all three of the two middle schools and the high school on Meade are 70% non-DoD kids, if not higher. So buses coming to MacArthur is not the problem.
Right.
Yeah, but parents aren't gonna wanna do that. They're not gonna want.
Especially with the
go-
immigration and,
Yeah.
well, yeah, we have now.
And the thing is,
So what is the capacity or what is the ability to just move the gate?
Honestly, probably like 0.
Why?
I mean, we just put, well, I mean, it's a gate, we just put a bunch of money into there and that is our access. There are, you move that back, there are Fort Meade neighborhoods that go in past back that gate. So if you look on both sides, if you drive in through the Rockenbach gate, on both sides, once you get past the gate, are military housing neighborhoods.
Right.
That,
Because like to get to me middle, you don't have to go through the gate.
Right.
To get to me high, you don't have to go through the gate. So there's no way to make me MacArthur gates.
No.
On God's green earth. There's no possible way. Because you have that commercial property at the corner of Rockenbach that's gonna be gateless.
Yeah.
There's no way on God's green earth. to make- I go to the commissary every weekend, you know what I mean? So. there's-
so from what you're talking about is that when you come in through Rockenbach,
Right,
the gate starts basically at the gate.
right,
That's where
past
gate
the
starts.
little gas station,
Right.
the sub shop,
On
etc.
both sides of that are housing areas and military housing that lives there. We have a fire department there, we have other facilities that need to be behind the wire to where you can't, because what I believe what you're proposing is to move the gate from where it's at up
Not the main
about a
gate,
quarter,
but
well,
there's no
no,
way
the
to annex the
Rockenbach gate.
school. I understand, but there's no way to annex the school out of it?
You'd have to make some weird type.
Yeah, it would-
Gate around the sidewalk.
Right.
So the strategy that we have in the draft strategy we have doesn't actually talk about moving the gate. Remember, we said that because we may want to look at different strategies, we kept it a little more vague, but addressing the point about how we can resolve any security issues or allow essentially fix that
Right.
issue.
And so we talked to Dr. Kennedy, who's the cluster superintendent. Dr. Arlotto and before, and then Dr. Bedell. When we get those issues, we deal with them. And like I said, over at least the last 3 years, there's been no more than 50 people who have come and said, you can't pick up your kid. And when we met with Principal Whiting and the MacArthur staff, you know, right before the last gun was found about a month ago, that was one of the issues. Are you still having these issues? And according to MacArthur, the issue had been resolved. Certainly to the point to where the numbers were so low that we would not entertain the idea of moving the gate for that limited number.
Yeah, but the bottom line is that Meade Middle is at capacity and MacArthur Middle has tons of.
Yeah,
Tons of
that's
capacity.
what we're trying to figure out, like,
How do we balance that?
yeah, that's the numbers don't.
Yeah.
I'm not following that MacArthur has got a whole bunch of capacity.
Oh, we just,
We just got the numbers the other week
Yeah,
when
yeah.
the school came, the school
yeah,
people came to give us numbers and Meade is over capacity or right at, Meade's at like 99 and MacArthur's at like 67%. Like it's something egregious.
Yeah, but again, we do have strategies talking about how to provide access or work out something to get access to the schools. And then we also have a few strategies about the
And I mean, the
adequate public
redistricting is
schools
coming
work.
up, so that may balance it out.
Well, I mean, that would be interesting to see how the district does balance out, but. I guess the one. You know, I mean, part of it is that, I guess that's a challenge of what you got when you're paying $1 a year for the land to have a school at, is what Anne Arundel County pays to have that property. It's on a federal facility. But the issue that parents don't want to go through. Getting access to post for a kid is an awful reason to get on post. It's not that difficult of a process, assuming you're not a criminal.
Right.
I mean, it really is not. If you have a reason to get onto the post, which having a child at the school is a lawful reason to get on post. getting access and being able to get on posts is not. It's a little bit harder, I guess, than it is to go to a regular school, but. Yeah. $1 is a pretty good deal. There's a little bit of.
Developers to give.
Federal government can't do that.
I wouldn't press that so hard.
Well, maybe we can then just follow up and get more clarification. Things like just better confusion. Any other questions for Chad? And then we can take a short break.
The last time we had
Chat
the,
all day.
Yeah, I know.
yeah, no, the last time we were there was this really nice special forces building in the back that you guys were like holding on to and not letting just anybody, not just letting any unit come in and take possession of it. You were kind of holding on to make sure like the right unit came in and got it.
Talking to old asymmetric warfare
In the back by the cemetery.
at the
right?
indoor range. Yeah, it's a really good place. They do have a special, and the reason. They do have a new organization that's going in there. That does require those capabilities, but why they weren't letting people go in there because. It was built around 2015, I think, is when that indoor range was built, some of those facilities, so. It was fairly new money, but specialized, so to just use that for general admin space was not. In the best benefit of DOD, but also in looking, they wanted to make sure that that space is being used by an appropriate unit, but that it's out now. They've got.
So you have a unit that came in there with a nice big budget, it's gonna rent it and pay their fair share.
Well, pay their fair share, that, yeah, people don't pay us very much. It's usually pretty free, I mean, they pay some electric bills, but. Yeah, there is a new unit that's been assigned, it's been given that.
When we went on the tour, it was still vacant,
Yep,
so.
Was that where our bus picked us up?
It was back by the cemetery, I remember the archives was on the right, and then there was that nice fancy.
Yeah.
Building that the police department would love to come in and do some training in the back.
no, our police department would love to as well. I mean, once it was closed, once asymmetric warfare group went out, nobody got to use that indoor
I
range
know.
for a long time. So I mean, we were part of that group that wanted to get back. And we don't even know if we will be able to use it now that the new tenants.
The state has the outdoor range right in that backyard. It's the other thing, isn't there? I don't know if access to that, but it's outside.
It's a kind of, no, because there's a federal range that they can all go use, because park police come up and everybody comes up and goes to the range over there, so.
I guess the one at the prison
That's
complex.
DOT.
That's okay. Yeah, it's used a lot, so.
Yes.
I know, I hear them from fire every weekend. That's
That's all I have for you.
Awesome.
I paid attention on the tour.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Right, so I have 7:15, so why don't we just take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll come back to. Help engage. All right, great, thanks.
Hey, Mark, could you unmute the Zoom?
Thank you for catching that. Yeah,
Sure thing.
all right. So it's Spencer. Spencer is one of our planners you've seen, right? He wasn't able to make it tonight, but he's participating remotely and he'll be presenting them the holding capacity. So catching up here, again, this is our org chart. I'll send you all an email with a few more links and some of the things that we've talked about tonight that we said we would follow up on. But our structure is really our new planning and zoning officer at the top, and then we have 3 divisions. We have the planning division, we have a development division, as well as a zoning division. Within the planning division, there's our cultural resources section, our research and GIS section, and long-range planning section. And I'll go, the next slides will talk about these different sections in a little more detail.
Is that what you're in? Long-range plan?
Yep, so we're in the long-range planning section. And then in the development division, we have 3 sections. They really field then and review applications that come in for development. If it's a residential project, they're going to the residential section. It's typically a commercial project or a multifamily type of project, that might go to the regional section. And then if projects are in the critical area along the coast, those are going to our critical area section. We also have a transportation section that assists with the review to make sure that these projects are following those guidelines, as well as a couple other aspects to advocate, not advocate it, but I'll use the word ensure again, that there are bicycle and pedestrian adequate bicycle and pedestrian facilities as part of these projects. And then in our zoning division, we have a zoning administration section that interprets our zoning, the zoning section of our code, as well as zoning enforcement. So if there's a business that's operating in an area where it shouldn't, or if there are junk cars or a variety of other items, I've got a few listed in a few more slides here. You can contact them and they can research that property a little bit more, what that use is, or how there might be a violation on that property. So as you can imagine, with our cultural resources section, we've talked about them actually a lot here over these past couple meetings, really making sure that our historical resources, cultural resources here in the county are protected. And their motto is such sites once destroyed cannot be replaced. So ensuring that those are protected as best as possible. And then, like I mentioned, Sam, myself, Cindy Carrier, who's our administrator for long-range planning, we work on these long-range plans, right? Let's see, do I want to say?
Don't forget research and GIS.
Yes. So next up is research and GIS. And if you go on to, how many folks have been to our Region 2 hub site? Did you guys look at a lot of statistics and maps? That is our research and GIS group. And it is a ton of information, right? So not only, I should say, a ton of information, but also some slick processes of how to explore in that web map. They're the ones that designed that feedback map, which was our second questionnaire, where you could drop a pin and leave some notes about what you like, what you dislike. So they're the ones behind the scenes that are creating a lot of these processes.
Working on comp zoning right now.
Yeah.
They'll work on preparing the maps that are gonna go in the plan. So they're kind of like the silent partners, but they're doing a big part of the lift too.
They did that really cool community meeting.
Yeah.
So then our development division, like I said, the folks are the transportation section, residential, regional, and critical area team. Again, they're the ones that are receiving the applications and having various entities within the county review them. So for example, when an application comes in for development, one application gets sent to long-range planning and we ensure that it's then that project is consistent with the goals, policies, and strategies within those master plans. Like Jim and Marilee can probably say that they've seen letters from myself and others with our comments on certain projects. So there are a few steps. If a project is required to have a community meeting, that would be the first step. And then again, whether it's project needs to have subdivision or if it's not required, you go through these different processes and ultimately end up then with grading and building permits.
So what was the process for the county ordinance, I guess, that allowed for houses to be developed and neighborhoods to be developed closer in this region than in the rest of the county? What they moved the
Is it cluster or like a PUD or?
county
there a specific
executive
area?
cited last year for
That
this
was the
specific
BRAC.
area that houses, the BRAC that could.
Yeah,
That could bring, that allow basically neighborhoods to be clustered closer together, specifically here.
It was just a higher density, right? Was there a cluster provision?
Yes. Submitted that we were all up in arms.
That they could go up to an R15 zoning district if they were in.
Did that recommendation come from planning and zoning?
No, that was introduced by the county council.
And what it did was it added housing to light industrial and commercial zones within the overlay zone. It didn't densify the housing. It added an option to building housing instead of office buildings or commercial. Okay. And that was apparently in response to the Fort's request. Because
No, absolutely not.
Because the council member told me that that in interviews with the commander of base, when they were asked what is the biggest need in the community from the fort, and they said housing.
No, and I sat in on.
Okay.
The biggest need for the community from Fort Meade was childcare facilities. That's what we needed.
This is what we talked about on the bus tour with Miss Shelley.
Sherry, yeah, she
Joined us. She talked about kid care, child care.
Yeah.
And housing.
See, Mary, you can go back and tell them I was right.
And affordable housing is a big deal, but not in a already condensed area. We just wanted affordable housing is good for everywhere. Right. Yeah, we were not, at least the command at the time, I can't speak for this commander, we've never had that discussion.
I
Command at
just
the time was not,
say something on
Yeah.
that. 30 days is not right. I didn't want to make that clear.
I don't think that's a great graphic.
It's,
Oh, what?
I don't think that's a great graphic, because
No,
Well, and
it
accurate.
looks like we're done in 2 months.
Email them.
Yeah.
That's right.
So for
Yeah.
the record, Sarah Lacy was full of crap.
yeah,
we were told, I don't know what we were told. But we were told. Hey, the meeting was recorded and she gave us.
So we had a reason to be up in arms about it. Like I said,
I'm not sure.
so again, we have our planning division, we have our development division, and then our third division is zoning. Zoning administration is one of the sections within that division. And again, they're overseeing the regulation, they help interpret these different uses related to these applications. And just to give you an example of some excerpts, to bring this almost full circle, up in that upper right-hand corner is that permitted use chart to give you an example of how these uses look. And then if it's a C, it's a conditional use. If it's an SE, special exception, or if it's a P, it's a permitted by right. And so thinking about our recreational cannabis use, I don't have that screenshot up here, but we said that they were special exceptions.
So I just.
Or conditionals.
Yeah, so they're conditional uses in some
Yeah.
zones and special exception. in others.
Okay. And then within our zoning code, we also have bulk regulations, which regulate what sort of what that building envelope can look like, the various setbacks, where the building is oriented on the property, how high the building can be. So various dimensions of how you can build on that lot. Zoning enforcement section, this is always, folks are always pretty interested in this because they're saying, hey, my neighbor's got a junk car. What can I do about that? And that is our zoning enforcement team. You can go online. I'm not sure whether it's through the 311 application on the website, or if you were to just within the Anne Arundel County zone, or sorry, Anne Arundel County webpage, just search for zoning enforcement. They have a form that you can fill out, or you can just email them as well if you have any concerns about any of these common complaints.
And you can do it anonymously.
The police department does commercial vehicles over 10,000 gross on the county roads as well, just saying from past experience.
So that's our agency, or our in a nutshell. Some of the common questions that we get about office planning and zoning is the planning advisory board, and are they the ones that review these development applications? They are not. They are done administratively by our planning and zoning officer. Our planning advisory board make recommendations relating to master plans. So if you remember, this plan has to go before the planning advisory board before it goes to council. So when it goes to planning advisory board, they'll review the plan. They'll also open up a public review process or receive public testimony on the plan, and that'll go into their deliberation and ultimately recommendation. And they also provide input on the capital budget.
While you're on that,
Sure.
some of my questions relate to that. How is the role of that planning advisory board in this county different related to like other counties like PG, Howard, Montgomery, et cetera?
Well, in Anne Arundel County, development projects are approved administratively by the planning and zoning officer. In most other counties in Maryland, there's a planning commission or a planning board that reviews some level of development projects. Like usually most jurisdictions will have minors that are approved by the planning director, but then the bigger stuff has to go up through the planning commission, which is it's a public process. Anne Arundel County doesn't work that way. Our planning advisory board only sees master plans and the capital budget items.
Which we're working through right now, and you can tune into those if you're curious. Yeah.
Like hours, they're gonna be on listening to capital budget presentations. And they're recorded, so like, Sunday, you want something to do in the afternoon.
Go and listen to this 8 hour
Yeah, but
meeting.
you could hear what the Board of Ed is gonna do, what they're proposing this year. And planning advisories board, their role in the capital budget is to try and get it down to the point where the budget balances. Like there are more requests right now than can get funded. So planning advisory board actually is kind of the funnel that they make recommendations on what should go in and what shouldn't.
And who appoints these people? How do these people, because we all got appointed here, so how is the process to get these people appointed? How does all that
They're
work?
appointed by the county executive.
County executive,
By region.
and tries to get at least one representative from each of the council districts.
Is there like a call for applications like there was for this, or is it because, hey, that's my friend? Are they recommended by county council members and that kind of thing? Like
It's at
how
the
is-
discretion of the executive. I mean, if the citizen is interested, then they obviously have and call the county administration and ask.
How many
Just let
board
them
members?
know.
7.
And is it a full-time job?
No, it's advisory,
Volunteer.
volunteer.
And they meet, the regularly scheduled meetings are twice a month, but many months we end up canceling. If there isn't an agenda item, they don't meet. Right now, they're in heavy meeting because they're plowing through capital budget items. Now, Anne Arundel County does have a boards and commissions page. It's possible that you could fill out an application, like if you wanted to be on the planning advisory board, you could And then if there was a vacancy for your council connect district, you might get appointed.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted, while you were on that topic, these are my
So
questions.
they're not chosen because they have experience in, like, the technical experience.
Yeah.
Oh, no, they came from all walks.
Yeah, that's what
However, there are former CAC members from Plan 2050 that have been appointed, so coming out of a region planning process, so let's say you get done with this volunteer position and you're like, I want to move on to the planning advisory board. It's a natural step, actually.
In my free time.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. While you were on that topic, sorry, I just had those questions. Go ahead.
Okay, modifications, as you can tell, that it's just a process to seek relief from Article 17, which is our subdivision and development article, the guidelines that projects must adhere to when developing the property. And with that, they must meet a set of criteria, ensuring that those modifications or the relief that they're requesting doesn't adversely impact the public health, safety, and welfare, as well as a couple other items here in that set of criteria. You know, if I can go one step further, people ask, well, are modifications bad? They're not inherently bad. In most cases, the code can be written in such a way, or if you were to write a code so specifically, you may not get projects that you may want in certain areas. So there will be situations where a project is requesting a modification that actually could have a benefit to the community or to the project itself. I'm going to settle on that for a sec because I'm sure there's questions.
So who is allowed to grant these modifications?
Planning and zoning officer. The director of planning and zoning.
So this lady,
No,
the one that was at the top of that
it's
list.
the top block on the thing.
Yeah, she's a couple boxes down.
So only that person.
Thing to understand about Anne Arundel County, Article 17 is the development code and Article 18 is zoning. So modifications are from Article 17, and in this county, the person who has authority to do those is the planning and zoning officer. On the other side, you have Article 18, which is zoning. And let's say you can't adhere to something in the zoning code, like a setback. That's a variance. The third item is the administrative hearing officer. So there is a whole nother process that's not on the list about how do you get relief from Article 7. I'm sorry, Article 18, and that's the administrative hearing officer. And that's standard. Most counties operate like that.
So give me an example of something you've had to get a modification for or something like that.
Yeah, what's covered under Article 17?
It's the entire subdivision code, so it's anything but zoning. So it really lays out how the processes you go through across the subdivision, anything from time requirements for submittals, how you design your site depending on the zoning, things like that. So, for example, if there's a timeline requirement to submit a plan, it's 30 days, but it's a complicated plan. You've got this combination might be more time. Submit a modification request to extend your time requirement 30 days to 60.
But the subdivision is allowed by the zoning.
Oh, the
They're two separate
zoning
articles.
is totally separate.
Okay.
There's a million different reasons why. Some were substantial, some were not substantial. Most of the ones that I think we do are pretty not substantial. An example might be combining a process when you're doing infill development on a parking lot, let's say, like we did several years ago at the airport. There's a 3-step process that we saw, but the first step has a lot to do with stormwater management. You ask for a modification to combine the two processes because you don't have any more stormwater management. It doesn't make sense. So give us the modification to combine it so we can get through the process more quickly and efficiently. In 2 steps.
And that also saves the county's review process as well.
Benefits everybody. And so there are things like that. Or you get a big dead tree on your site, but because it's 30 inches, you may have to make a request for something to get rid of it.
Do you have to get an arborist too? Because you're going to.
Yes. Yes,
Just like I did.
yes,
Oh, Jesus, okay.
yes, it's, that stuff's painful, but I mean, if we can make the case that, look, it's dead, we have an arborist that's telling you it's dead.
But you still have to give you a certified arborist and a piece of paper and that's just.
That's correct,
So you're not absolved of that. That makes me feel better.
that's correct.
I'm not so salty anymore. Okay. When is the director allowed to grant modifications and exceptions on building permits? While we're on this modifications.
Building permits is,
It's
Separate.
we have an inspections and permits. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm clueless about all this. That's why I have one page list of questions. I don't do this every day.
One separately, I'll find
No.
No.
Yeah.
I think you could do it, Nicole. You want to switch careers?
No, I'm so close to being done. It's not even fun. No, thank you. I'm sticking to what I know. Okay. Okay, no, yeah, okay, keep going.
Okay.
Sorry. I was just trying to catch you while you were on this section.
You know, and this recreational cannabis is a great example that we've been using throughout, because here we are back again at what the administrative hearing officer does. And one of the items they're responsible for is reviewing special exceptions, which we said is how one of the medical, was it licensed medical cannabis uses is classified in the permitted use chart as a special exception. So I think we've discussed here that they would be then required, the applicant would be required to come before the administrative hearing officer. So again, appointed by the county executive, it's not an office of planning and zoning responsibility.
However, for a special exception, our zoning administration section reviews the application and they write the equivalent of a staff report recommendation to the administrative hearing officer, and all of that goes out to the public like a week before the hearing. And then generally special exception uses have the ability to have impacts on the neighborhood. You know, a classic example would be like a gravel pit where there's a ton of truck traffic going in and out. That can have a negative impact if it ends up next door to you. So there's a public hearing process so that, number one, the public can come in and testify, and the administrative hearing officer can condition the approval to then mitigate the impacts. That is the purpose for a special exception.
And there are already conditions that they need to meet
Yeah.
within that use. So this would be anything else that you're saying.
I got a lot of questions here. Okay, so the county exec appoints these people. Do they have person? Do they have any qualifications?
She's an attorney.
Usually an
Yeah.
attorney, okay.
No, not usually, absolutely.
I think it all
Administrative hearing exam for officers and attorney.
Yeah, okay. And
With
then,
land use experience.
so this one has to have some kind of qualification.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. And then do these follow like usual kind of courtroom rules and things like that? Because I've been to administrative hearings for like nursing hours and things like that with like Division of Nursing Services and what have you, and we follow like law courtroom rules. Are those followed here?
Really closely. I mean, a lot of the projects have an attorney that's representing them there, and they usually follow them.
I'm completely drawing a blank. I mean, like the administrative hearing officer has probably a set of rules that they've established. I can't think of what the name of them is, but even the planning advisory board, they have,
Like Robert's Rules of Order kind of stuff?
well, the planning advisory board is definitely using Robert's rules. The administrative hearing officer is different because it's one person. They're not, it's not a, you know, a body that's voting.
It's like an arbitrator.
No, he actually makes a decision on.
Yeah, like it's legally binding decision, like when the administrative hearing officer for nursing hours, like it's a legally binding decision and that's it.
Yeah.
Literally, it looks like it's issued on a court document.
It's a formal.
Yeah,
And he has a form, I mean,
So-
county goes through their recommendations, then they let, opposition and then. There's very formal format that he goes through.
And then after this, is there a next step, like Board of Appeals or something like that?
There is
after this?
Only if it's appealed.
And so it's like you guys go here and you don't like what is issued, you can go to the Board of Appeals after this and what have you.
And if they don't like the Board of Appeals decision, they can go to circuit court. But let's say you get your use through the administrative hearing officer, you get your special exception granted, then you're going into the development review process with either a sketch or preliminary plan, or a final plan or site development.
And at this point, you all need lawyers.
No, so after that decision is rendered in, Christina's example, you still have a 3-year process for public plan process. You still have the 3-step process that Mark had up there before. Once you get this decision, you can then start that. So you have step 1, sketch, step 2, final, step 3, grading. So all those steps can only start once you have that administrative hearing decision, if you need one. That's the case of the special.
And you don't always need an attorney. So it's not like every step needs an attorney. In some
No, but
process-
if you were to get to hearing officer or Board of Appeals,
You need an attorney.
that's what I'm.
Recommended.
There you do, it is
Right.
recommended, I guess you.
An average cost of those.
But just to put it in perspective for like a homeowner, if you say you want to put a deck and you can't meet the setback, you have to go to the zoning hearing officer. I have seen people represent themselves at those.
Yeah, for like a deck, but for you guys, like big projects, absolutely. And those costs for you are like tens of thousands.
Can,
Um, gotcha. And, okay. The county executive, so it's gotcha. And is there like a standing before a hearing officer in the Board of Appeals? What is that?
Standing means do you have the ability to weigh in on the case? I don't have any details about how Anne Arundel does that. Like the thing is, so let's say you live here in West County and there's a project in Severna Park and you decided you don't like this project in Severna Park, but you don't live anywhere near Severna Park. Should you be able to testify on that project? So standing normally says that, it is your neighborhood, you are affected by it, you have the right to testify. But I don't know how strict we are in Anne Arundel County. Probably find that out for you.
All right, I think that's it for. Okay, that's it for the hearing and Board of Appeals stuff.
Okay. So a question we get a lot too is whether the county can cap growth. We've heard, can you put a no vacancy sign up at the county boundary? And office planning and zoning, we don't support that position for a variety of reasons. The legality is, there might be folks who have a legal lot of record in the county, and you can't deny them that person to develop their property. Okay, then looking at current and future growth rates, the county's growth rate is slowing. So taking that into consideration, that there isn't this rampant growth that's occurring, you could have unintended consequences where if you're then limiting the supply of, for example, housing, then the housing costs can go up. And we've already talked about how there are issues with housing affordability within the county. And then efficacy. So we don't see capping growth as the tool to mitigate any issues with growth and development. We can use a variety of other tools to do so. And those tools can typically be found in Article 17 and 18 in our county code that we've been talking about, and really that we've been making strategy or developing strategies to address on how to really ensure that we're getting the type of development that we want, where we want that type of development, and how it happens.
Is that county growth, so 0.7%? But is that broken up, or do you break that up by areas in the county? So is Region 2's growth at 0.7 for the growth in this area be considered slow?
That's the overall countywide.
Right.
Yeah. There are, I think there's statistics up on our website that do talk about Region 2's growth specifically.
Because I mean, the complaints I've always heard isn't necessarily, at least here, isn't that the county as a whole is growing, but this area is growing too fast.
Mhm.
That's usually the complaints that we feel.
Right.
So,
But we have tools. Right, so if there are impacts from this growth, we can utilize a variety of tools to ensure that everybody still maintains that high quality of life in the area. So you might hear people use the term smart growth.
Yeah.
Right, you're still having that growth, but you're doing it in a way that you're focusing it to targeted areas that probably already have infrastructure, which then decreases tax base for folks. And then when you sort of have that critical mass of people in an area, it could help then support public transportation and get those cars off the road that, again, we hear people talk about as being an issue of growth. And again, when we're utilizing these tools, we're ensuring that we're being equitable with them. And again, making sure that we're not concentrating bad development in certain areas, that again, it is equitable throughout the entire county. And again, I think if you were to look through our strategies that we have, I think they all sort of touch on these smart growth type of aspects. So those are just a few of the common questions that we get, but I'll open it up for questions or comments before we move on to the next section of holding capacity. So
I had a couple, because we had talked about like staffing levels, and that was a couple, we had a little bit of a discussion about staffing levels.
Yep.
Related to OPZ and staffing levels, kind of job requirements, training requirements, CE requirements. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit, or maybe your boss can talk a little bit about that?
you're talking about our what? Okay.
Yeah, like your staffing levels within the department, because we had a little bit of a discussion about that. We actually took that out as a strategy. What are the job requirements, certifications, training requirements, CE requirements? That's something that is of concern. When it comes to that, we have one gentleman in our old development who loves to call zoning enforcement on the hotels on the regular. I'm sure he's well known by name in that office. So just for our knowledge, what are the, because we asked about staffing levels and like what are the requirements for someone to get this job? What are the continuing ed requirements, training requirements upon hire? Like what are some of these things for people to have these jobs with your department, various departments and what have you?
Yes.
So I'll address the job requirements. So all of the jobs within the county are actually codified with a job description and minimum job requirements. Planners, depending on the level, have to have a minimum bachelor's degree in urban planning or related field. So that could be architecture, landscape architecture, geography, so forth. And then a number of years of experience. And that's, again, the code defines extensive experience, thorough experience, and it gives a number of years. And then on top of that, it also allows the department to add on preferred qualities, preferred qualifications. So if I was looking for somebody that has experience in comprehensive planning with a transportation focus, I could add that into preferred qualifications. You know, and then, you know, of course, you start narrowing it down, you limit your applicant pool, so we still, you know, we'll look at anybody that meets those minimum qualifications and there's a whole.
And then some of us are certified planners. We do have a continuing education requirement of 16 units a year. And actually, I would say long range planning has the largest number of certified planners of any of the sections in the office.
So it's not a requirement that after like 2 years of hire, they get that? Is it strongly suggested?
No, it's not a requirement that you get the certification. Again, that's usually one of the things that we put on as preferred qualification. I mean, it does cost people money, actually quite a bit of money, and also, well, not just for the dues, and also in the education requirements. And in good years, the county will help out with that. You know, lean years they haven't, so it is an issue because it's quite expensive, especially if you're starting off in the planning field.
And then code enforcement, same thing, how are they staffed, what is their role and authority and then training requirements? Because for us, when it came to the hotels, one of the issues we ran into was that there weren't enough people to come and deal with it on a regular basis, to the point that me, the councilman, the fire chief and the police, we had to sit down and rewrite those codes because that was the only way we could get the hotels to come into compliance. So we didn't have the power and the teeth with the code enforcement that way. So we had to rewrite health department codes and police codes and fire codes to get them that way, to get some issues resolved with the hotels on 198. So we had to go about it in other venues to get what we needed to get done because they literally tried to burn it down and they couldn't burn it down.
Yeah.
With the meth labs that were in there. So we had to put some more teeth to the police code and the fire marshal code and some health department codes to get them to be shut down randomly here and there and other ways because we couldn't get what we needed to get done through that code. Over a 20-year period.
I think zoning enforcement, their staff also, every position in the county has to meet minimum qualifications and they are screened. There is a screening process for doing it. I really cannot speak to you about whether or not zoning enforcement has enough staff, doesn't have enough staff. I can talk to you all day about the planning division, but not the zoning division. I mean, we could get you some information about it.
Yeah, I don't think we currently have.
And then, you know, the authority piece, you know, that was a big issue for us because every time we tried to talk to them or have them come do something, they couldn't do anything about the hotels. You know, there were complaints, not our one friend who loves to call them every day, but when we had some legitimate concerns, like as a Medicaid coordinator, I would do a home visit to the hotel and I would see things that were, you know, egregious and unsanitary and things like that from a safety and sanitary standpoint and what have you, from a social work kind of perspective, home visit. And I had legitimate concerns. Who was not this individual who called every day. And they would call me back and say, you know, I can't do it. I can't make the visit. Can you send me pictures? So I would go out next month and do the visit and take pictures and send them back. And they're like, oh yeah, we really need to do something about that. And then they wouldn't get done. And I'd go back another month later for my home visit and see that nothing was done, you know, and so this became a repetitive issue and, you know, nothing gets done.
Yeah, and I unsanitary, that doesn't sound like a zoning, I think that's.
And that's when I had to just go from the health department issue. But I mean, there were things like, you know, we're talking electrical outlets and these were things that were like safety and
Yeah,
stuff.
and that would be the inspections discussion. So zoning enforcement is, they enforce the zoning Article 18. So that's sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out if it's health department related or police or you know, building inspections and permits. And a lot of times people think that inspections and permits and planning and zoning are one department. We're actually two separate functions, but there's inspectors in inspections and permits that for building inspection.
Well, and most of the enforcement responsibility in the county is with the Department of Inspections and Permits. We simply have zoning enforcement because we implement the zoning code. But really, the large number of enforcement people work for inspections and permits. We have a small one section only in OPZ.
So the state has a Department of Planning and then there's a county department. What is the interface between you guys?
So Maryland Department of Planning is sort of the, I'm not even say they're the regional, because that's BMC, but, so, kind of hard to explain with, so certain, they oversee the land use article. Which has certain requirements for local jurisdictions, and they're different depending on if you're a charter county or not a charter county, or if you're Montgomery and Prince George, they're treated differently. But, their main function is to review our general development plan, which is required in all jurisdictions. And also they will review other master plans that may not be in their jurisdiction, like our water sewer master plan has to be approved by the Maryland Department of Planning. I mean, Maryland Department of Environment, but Maryland Department of Planning gives comments on that. They won't review the region plan. That's something. We may send them a copy, just as a courtesy.
But they would
but they don't oversee
this.
like the walk and roll plan or the transportation functional master plan, or any of the other kind of master plans that the county does. That's really under the local jurisdiction.
So there's not a lot of major land use planning that they coordinate with the county.
I mean, peripherally, I mean, the obviously Plan 2040, our general development plan, they reviewed it and gave us comments on it. They don't necessarily approve it, but they also look at pieces of it. So there are functions within state law that we also carry out, like the priority funding areas map, the Rose Tiers map. They will review those and give us comments. Priority funding areas, for example, if someone asked to be added into a priority funding area, we would look through that, see if it meets the criteria, send a letter to them asking that they concur, and they'll come back and they either concur or they don't. And if they don't, then they put a comment on the map state. And so it really doesn't do us any good to have a comment because you're not going to get funding for that area. Same with the growth tiers, which is sort of the septic still doesn't want to affect this area too much, which would be the plan for service.
We also coordinate with them on other studies. There's the military base coordination study that where they just rolled out a website as well as a guide to ensure that right along the fence that there's compatibility and that there aren't any adverse impacts on either side for the entities. So we'll coordinate with them on those types of.
Yeah, they invited us into that to, they led that effort, invited us into part.
And since the county exec appoints a lot of folks, does he really have any influence over OPZ decisions or
directs the work program? I mean, it gives us sort of direction for priorities.
I know you want to say something.
I do.
That's shocking. Off the record, I mean, I know this is recorded, but.
Off the record, but I know it's recorded. That's funny. So the county executive has a chief administrative officer who runs all the department heads report up to that person. And so the chief administrative officer, in conjunction with the county executive, they appoint the planning and zoning officer. And we have a brand new one that has now been with us for 4 weeks. Her name is Jenny Dorkowski. She came from Harford County. So the county executive does have influence because they get to choose who leads the office. The other thing is definitely the departments in the overall org chart for Anne Arundel County government. We tier off of county exec. We do not tier off the county council. Now we work with the county council. And they certainly initiate legislation that may be land use related. And we have somebody, Lynn Miller, in our zoning section who weighs in on legislation that's been initiated by the council. When this region plan goes to the county council, we will hand it off to the county exec. The county exec will ask the council chair to introduce the bill. So that it's definitely different than, you know, council introduced bill versus when the county executive asks the chair to submit.
You talk a lot about zoning code. How are updates to it made? We talked a lot about, I think in one thing we mentioned like update code, or that we put some language in there that was kind of vague, but specific enough related to that. What is the role of OPZ in updating the code? Or
so if you're talking about a comprehensive, let's say, amendment to the zoning code or Article 17, which is the development code, it could be initiated by staff. The county exec's office has to be willing to support the legislation and then ask the council to introduce it. The other way changes to the zoning code and Article 17 happen is the county council will introduce an amendment. So it can go either way. We have not had any kind of comprehensive update to the zoning code in quite a while. We were a bit overdue for one.
All right, well, with that,
Yeah.
try to
So,
wrap it up. I know we got some other pieces, so.
yeah,
yeah, sorry, that was.
The heavy piece is coming now, holding
Yeah.
capacity.
okay. So I'm gonna stop sharing here. Okay, great.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yep,
Okay, great. So like Mark said, I'm Spencer. I've been in the meetings. I'm in the long range planning division. Oh, second.
we can hear you. Yep.
Okay, sorry, I got a little error message. Okay. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the holding capacity. So this is one of the first things that we're going to.
Spencer, you kind of
We lost.
still there.
Can you hear me?
We can, but we lost your screen sharing.
Weird. I'm getting error message. Hang on 1 second. Let me try one more time.
If not, I can share the screen.
All right, we good now? You good?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, so I'll give a brief overview of what this is, and then I'll show a few numbers at the end, and then we'll revisit these numbers next time just to show you guys. So basically, a residential holding capacity analysis is a model that we run in cooperation with the GIS and research section. And it estimates the number of additional housing units that could be built under the existing zoning code. So the zoning as is and the development regulations. So you might have heard this also called a build out analysis or maybe residential development capacity analysis. They all mean generally the same thing. And we use these results to support long range planning for land use, roads, infrastructure, all types of things. The method that we use to do this follows guidance from the Maryland Department of Planning, which we just talked about a little bit. And then we follow best practices from other jurisdictions as well. And the model I'm going to go through in a second considers the zoning, development regulations, what regulated natural features we have in the county, and then also land values. So one of the biggest caveats about this is the analysis provides an estimated number of residential units. It's going to give an exact number, but it's really not parcel specific study or a guarantee that that development is or would not occur. It's really just to look at the high level, the big numbers, which is what we'll see. Because I mean, there's so many factors that contribute to determining if and how a property is developed, market changes, private agreements, leases, finances, personal preferences. There's so many micro issues that could go into it. So the key steps that we go through, first we'll identify the parcels in the county that have development potential. We'll go back and look in previous years and calculate actual yield of recent development in each zone type. We'll apply that density to the developable parcels that we've already identified. And then we can take those numbers and we can compare this with growth forecasts, sewer capacity, infrastructure capacity, road capacity, school capacity, all those types of things, just as one more input into this process. So first, we identify properties that can be developed. First of all, we look at vacant land. This is identified based on if the property has an assessed value of improvements of less than $10,000. We'll qualify that as vacant. Then we look at parcels that might have redevelopment potential. So this is identified based on an assessed value of improvements less than the assessed value of land. So to give an example, a property might have an assessed land value of $1 million, but the value of improvements is assessed at 100K or 100,000. So, kind of general high level real estate economics could indicate that that property has potential for redevelopment to a higher value. So this isn't the same as a market analysis or feasibility study for redeveloped property. It's basically just a high level indicator that we use to inform the estimate. Then finally, we look at subdivision potential. So we look at the sizes of the parcels that we have here in this group to see if they actually in residential zoning districts, to see if they're large enough to actually be subdivided and add more units to those land with the zoning code. So properties are removed from the analysis that are owned by federal, state, and local government. So those aren't considered to be developable. Those that are recorded on subdivision plats as open space or floodplain parcels, because those are undevelopable. Those constrained by recorded conservation easements. So those that are on ag preservation lists with the Maryland Environmental Trust, we take those out as well. Finally, we take out parcels that are currently in the subdivision review process. So those would be the pipeline projects. So anything that's in the pipeline when this analysis is done would not show up in our final numbers. So how do we allocate units to those properties? So our holding capacity looks at all the residential zoning districts and then other zoning districts where residential use is allowed. So those are those listed there. In certain areas, we can develop residential in those zones. So we take a yield and apply them to those areas as well. The analysis removes protected natural features based on publicly available data. So that would be steep slopes, wetlands, stream buffers, considering that those are not developable. So finally, for the remaining potentially developable area of a parcel, we apply a yield factor. So the yield factor, like I had mentioned, is based on a review of all the subdivision applications and development projects over a period of time, typically the past 5 years or recent years, and we calculate a density based on each zoning district. So we have maximum allowable densities that can be in each zone, but we don't use that because in real life the areas don't develop to those actual densities. It gives us a more conservative estimate and accounts for the needs to dedicate land for roads, infrastructure, open space, etc. So with these numbers, we can review the results of these high-level numbers and compare them to multiple things. But one of the things that we look at is household forecasts. to basically inform land use and zoning decisions. So how should we change zoning or direct public investments or to support different types of development in different areas based on the holding capacity? The big caveat with this is that our holding capacity analysis and the population forecasts are not directly comparable. They have nothing to do with each other. This is again just a high level analysis to be one input into this process. Holding capacity looks at current conditions of land, like we talked about, where I just described. Forecasts look at trends in population, employment, and extrapolate potential future estimates. So here's some numbers. The first row is the family household forecast projected by the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, which is our regional planning agency. And we use those numbers broken down as kind of our guideline for what the household growth is projected to be. The second row there is the holding capacity results that were performed last year. You can see that the countywide number there is 40,000, around 40,000. Region 1 and Region 2 there. We have those numbers around 2,000 to 3,000. So I've got Region 2 there, and then I included Region 1, Region 3, Region 5 as kind of surrounding areas. And you can see that if we compare the household forecast for these regions based on the number of developable capacity that we have for housing, we have a deficit of about 3,000 units in households in Region 2. And again, these are estimates. They're not targets. You can see that Region 3 and Region 5, they have some surplus in areas surrounding. So again, these boundaries are they're artificial. We created them. So there are some capacity in other regions around us, but a lot of that capacity Region 5 is related to the Odenton Town Center. So this is just one input that we can revisit next time when we talk about specific areas in the county and any decisions, and hopefully can inform our conversation. Does anyone have any questions? I know that was a quick run through there.
What's the first line, family household forecast? When was that number based on? I was.
So the first line is the household forecast numbers that are produced by the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, which is our regional planning agency.
But is that how many households they project between 2020 and?
Yes. So that's the number of households. Like for the countywide number there, they project that the county will grow by 31,000 households.
Regardless of where they live, house, apartment.
Yes, so those would be housing units. So, apartment would be 1 unit, a single family home would be 1 unit. So like households, families.
So in Region 2, we're expecting 5,600 households. We currently have the capacity for 2,200 households.
Yes, based on current zoning.
And does that include even that bill we had last year that would move to R15?
So you're talking about the BRAC bill?
Yeah.
So this does not take into account the BRAC bill. This was performed, the analysis, the yields were performed, were calculated prior to that. So we don't see what the actual yields for those to use later. So this one does not. Our next round will, that we're in process right now.
And when will the next round be done?
Ideally by, I believe, the end of this year or the end of the summer. I'm not 100% sure. It's in process right now. We're working with GIS on that.
Okay.
And we'll revisit these numbers on March 4th, we just wanted to give you the big download today. We're gonna come back to it on that Saturday morning. And Spencer, do you have the map of the BRAC parcels that we were able to do the analysis on saying as of today, parcels that are 5 acres and larger that meet those zoning district requirements?
It's not in this presentation, it's in the next,
It's in the March 4th, so
Okay.
we'll show you what parcels would be, say, eligible for that additional overlay
Mhm.
for additional units. But again, you know, this analysis is just sort of one point that we'll use when we go through our mapping analysis of where you might make recommendations to upzone areas or downzone areas. Again, it's not meant to be a target, but just to give you an indication that over the next 20 years, with this type of growth, you may want to consider upzoning or intensifying certain areas to accommodate this growth in this area.
For rezoning, right?
Rezoning, right? Yeah. So, and again, I think one of the major players is Fort Meade is making sure that you're having this type of higher density so that people aren't traveling from Pasadena using the roads to get here, that they're already in close proximity, or because you already have a certain level of density here that could help them support public transportation like we talked about before. And again, we've got what we'll present to you on March 4th is Spencer had also worked on a caption map identifying any strategies that had specific locations. So for example, where we said, hey, we want to increase bus routes between Laurel and Glen Burnie so people can get to county buildings and state buildings. To help support public transportation, you might want more density in that area. Again, just putting that out there as a very general example, but again, we'll come back to these numbers, just use it as one point of reference in your decision making then beginning March 4.
But Chad, you're saying they don't necessarily need more housing.
So, well, they don't need it right here.
Right.
I mean, housing is stacked, they need to be able to get to housing in reasonable, in the
Right.
area, I mean, but everybody wants affordable housing, I mean.
They just don't want to write
Push it away, the more traffic congestion occurs.
Didn't we hear from the traffic folks that? Traffic.
Oh,
Howard County, Carroll County, even as far as Pennsylvania.
and really our east-west is our hardest, like, there's a lot of stuff that, a lot of transportation that goes north-south, there is zero, well, limited that goes east to west, and that tends to be where most of our population does come.
So you're saying they want affordable housing, just not 5 seconds out the back gate.
Well, affordable housing is like everybody wants affordable housing. I don't think that there is a need for, I mean, our average salaries are like $95,000 to $120,000.
Including like outliers. For the salaries, that include like the outliers.
Well, but that goes for everybody. I would go up, I mean, that same argument can then be made for the casino to have more affordable housing closer in the area too, right?
And again, affordable housing is a relative term of not exceeding,
Right.
say, 30%.
Right, that's affordable to me is not the
Right,
affordable to
right.
Shara.
But we use workforce housing that is actually then defined by area median income.
They were saying on our tour though, that there were some, like, I guess, like, lower level soldiers that were living in like dormitory situations and they didn't have a lot of housing for them.
So we had barracks for our single junior service members, and we are working on military construction projects to get for barracks for that population.
So are you gonna be able to accommodate them soon, or is that something?
Well, they're not an issue so much, is it? more so the civilian.
Families.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I say, Fort Meade's service member wide, it's only about, out of that 65,000, only about 15,000.
It's a civilian base.
A vast majority are civilians, contractors who live in this area and travel. So, I mean. Filling this place with a bunch of houses and subdivisions might not actually be attractive to a lot of the people who want to live here. They might actually want to have a bit of separation, space and quality of life and things that they're looking for. We obviously want to have places for them to live. But then as a community partner, I don't know the nicest way to say it, but if this region gets all cramped, we do not want, well, we don't want Fort Meade to be blamed for the cramping.
Yeah, but it's gonna get cramped one way or the other,
Yeah.
either with traffic or with living conditions.
Yeah.
If the jobs are coming, the base is growing, we're busting at the seams. The live, work, play model suggests take the trips off the roads, locate the house. Some of the reason why the housing is going so crazy, because there's not many options at all for housing. Because it's been so constricted over the years. But by adding the capacity to the mix in the locale where the jobs are, we'll make a live, work, play model. So people aren't commuting from Sykesville to Fort Meade or the Pennsylvania line to Fort Meade. So a lot of what we heard from Sherry,
Yep.
is these long commutes that we have, and I've been hearing this for years too.
Yep.
People are coming from, there's these diagrams from all over the place.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the housing stock isn't here. People have been saying that you need the housing stock locale with the port growth and the outside growth as well.
I would say housing stock not being here. So from what you're talking about, at least for the sport specifically, things like we're trying to do at Odenton, tied to a mass transportation system, rail line, those type of developments we're absolutely looking for. Something that's tied to, but even if that's out in Laurel or other areas where you could get on from the MARC station, drive in, come in, or be tied to a bus system that you don't even need a car to get to work, that you can depend on mass transportation. That's 100% accurate in what would be ideal for, for smaller families. I think Mark and I had the discussion, like Mark asked, well, I heard that you want single room apartments. No, we don't want single room apartments. That's what our dorms are for. We want things that families can live in. Conversely, though, the actual why people travel so far out of here is because land is cheaper and taxes are cheaper. I mean, so you ask a lot of employees that live in Pennsylvania, the first thing they'll tell you, I don't have to pay as much taxes, and I get a whole lot more land for anywhere that Maryland has to offer.
Yeah, that's what they're told until then. I know plenty of people who moved to Pennsylvania on that false assumption and found out that, yeah, the income tax is lower, but then there's a separate school tax. You gotta pay for garbage collection, and they find out they've been snookered.
Well, it's no different than DC, right? I mean, Anne Arundel County, Howard County, the region is a bedroom community for DC, right? Because not everybody wants to live in DC, pay those taxes. So people come out here, commute into the.
Yeah, I mean, I know that property prices are lower in Pennsylvania, but death and taxes, there's no avoiding it.
Do you, Chad, do you provide a bus from like the Odenton train station to the base, or from the Laurel Mark stations to the base or Savage?
The county connector, there is the Piney Orchard shuttle that does pick up from Odenton. And then some of our larger tenants do provide shuttles and ride share and options like that. The fort itself, well, at least the garrison or the installation itself does not. Outside of making the partnership with the county to do the local transit and then.
The CRT, they have to ride the CRT.
Yeah. But then, so because the issue was, well, they can't get on base. We like work to make sure that there are certain buses that have access to the installation, things of that nature that they can take.
Because I think that new apartment complex over by Savage is doing drop-offs every morning. Cause I see them when I go to the coffee shop.
Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, so again, we have about 15 minutes left or 10 minutes left, really. And rather than get into, again, another introduction to development policy areas, plan land use and zoning, what I'll do is I'll send you some materials ahead of time as a primer, and then we'll also go into it some more, do an overview of it on March 4th. So let me just bring up one more slide here of next steps. Again, what our homework is over the next 2 or so weeks.
While you're pulling that up, can I ask a question? The holding capacity you did for housing, have you also analyzed like office and retail? So we don't have any idea of the needs for that.
We haven't analyzed that.
Okay, so next steps, again, what OPZ is going to be responsible for is, again, providing you some materials in advance of our next meeting. That'll include the draft plan land use maps, as well as the zoning maps. Again, like Christina had mentioned, our GIS team has been collaborating with us, and they've been developing these maps. And we will be then presenting those and identifying, again, where certain areas have changed from our current plan land use and zoning map. And like I said, we plan on launching the draft strategies public review on March 1st. So be on the lookout for that. We'll send an email to you all, letting you know it's all live. We'll send an email out to the e-distribution list. And what we're asking you all then to do is help spread the word, get the public to participate in that questionnaire.
Would it be a Google or something?
It'll be a Survey Monkey.
Okay, good, that we can
Yep.
send out for the various HOAs to respond.
So as you can imagine, we reviewed a lot of strategies. Don't, tell your folks, don't be intimidated that there are a lot of strategies. Tell them to really chunk it down, do 1 or 2 types of topics each day if they're willing. Okay. And again, to review those materials that we'll be sending out to you in the next week or so, and be prepared to discuss. Okay. So again, looking at the schedule, March 1st, public review of the draft strategies. March 4th, we'll be meeting at National Business Park, building 135 on the first floor conference room. It's in the rear of the building. I've got a map. Okay, 1 second. Where we'll talk about those maps. And then March 16th is our next meeting to again follow up where we left off on that mapping. So
And you're bringing bagels for breakfast.
bagels, coffee. Yeah, that's what I do. Okay, so
It's
Thomas,
not the first floor though. That's
what this is, yeah, so.
it's around the back, right?
Thank you.
So
It's technically the second floor, because when you go around the back, that grade, that entry is the
Right.
second floor, just for everybody's sake. So drive around back to the building, you will walk right in, right off the front door of the conference room. It's easy, but don't go in front.
Yeah, put all that in the invite that you sent us in with the map of this.
Yep.
So we all don't get lost.
What kind of room is it? Is it like or style?
No different than this, right?
He's got bagels on
Like
there.
your windows?
Oh, no, it's a skip space. We're gonna keep you in.
There it is.
No phone, Christina. He's gonna feed us, so I'm all right.
yeah,
That's our next meeting.
our next meeting is March 4th,
Yeah.
Saturday at 9 a.m.
That's the one where we were.
Gonna get it up for that.
Yep. So Joe, I'll hand it back to you then.
Yes, well, I know we're running up on, I think, this room in a few minutes, so, Chad, it was really great to have you here, I think.
Thank you.
Meeting ran long, but for good reason, because Chad was here, and we anxiously awaiting you for a year to join us.
I apologize for missing other meetings. They ran right into JV basketball.
Well, as you can see, you are very popular, so you are more than welcome And, we look forward to having you.
And I am on the email distro list, so I've listened to a couple of these meetings online, but if you have questions, so Sherry worked in my office.
Yeah, no, she
But
was.
is there ever any questions you guys have, or you want to try later?
Well, there's gonna be a lot more, because I think, some things you told us today.
Are in stark contrast.
There you, thank you. That's the right way to put that. Stark contrast. So, with that, I will, just because we're running short of time, we're gonna lose this room. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I'll take Thomas this time and Mary Lee is the second. So, okay, all right, thank you.